My name is James. I'm a technical account manager at Epic Games, and my team, the technical account management team, we specifically focus on supporting studios that are using Unreal Engine, integrating Epic Online Services, or shipping on the Epic Games Store. So really, if you're a game studio and you're using any of Epic's tech, we'll probably be involved for that technical relationship to help make sure you're successful. I'm really excited to be on the stage today. It's been, 5, 6 years since I've been able to present at GDC. I love the chance to share what I love, and so it's really great to be back. Today, I'll be talking to you about Epic Account Services and a little bit about Crossplay. Hopefully, this is an evolution of what we've done before, talking about EOS and Crossplay, and really taking it to the next level of how you can be more successful. This is a technical topic, but it's really not going to dig into actual coding and more on the strategy around tech decisions that you can make a better game for you and build better experiences for your players. Just to get started, here's kind of a quick overview of what we'll be doing, the general outline. Again, a lot of these talks sometimes tend to go long. I do want to make sure I leave time for Q&A. I want to make sure that while I'll go over the things I think is important, you have time to ask questions that is more relevant to you. That way you get more out of this, and it's a more beneficial session for everyone. So take what you can, but please, I do want to make sure you have the opportunity to share your thoughts and ask and get more insight. To get started, let's talk a little bit about Epic's history, all right? And talk about what has brought us to this point today. Since the early days of Epic, one of the pillars of who we are as a company is we want to take tools that we've developed from our own projects and then provide them externally. It's our very DNA to dog food our own tools and then improve that offering and then ship it out so that people can take what we have learned and make better experiences, build better games, and solve similar problems, and it allows them to accelerate their development. From Unreal is how we got the Unreal Engine. As we have grown and expanded over the years, that commitment has remained a consistent part of our strategy. It started with Unreal Engine, and it's expanded over time into a suite of tools that cover a number of disciplines and even industries, all to empower creativity. I know for myself, especially as I was joining Epic, it was sometimes easy to forget that Epic Games is both a game studio and a tools company. And while they are very closely tied, they are two entities to a greater whole. Through the Epic Games Store, launched in 2018, and through our suite of services, we support the growth and success of creators. We do succeed when our creators succeed. That was something that our GM of the store, Steve Allison, said yesterday, and it really is true. Whether you're completely new to the Epic ecosystem or you're using our full suite of products, we are truly thankful and excited to have you as a part of our community and grateful to have you on this journey with us. All right, just to make sure we're covering our bases, for those of you who are unfamiliar, I do want to break down what is Epic Online Services. Epic Online Services, I'll probably mention it as EOS, is a free, open, and modular set of common backend tools that cover a variety of functionality that powers the backend of your game. This tool set was based on the matchmaking and cross-platform functionality that we had when we built Fortnite, and now we've made it available to others. Once again, we take what we have learned, and we provide it to others so that you can solve these problems faster and not have to build your own solutions to do so. So you have a common set of services, already tested and proven to work at scale within Fortnite, that you leverage within your own games. Hopefully, this helps streamline your development process and simplify your development as a whole, allowing you to spend less time worrying about things like, is my matchmaking working, and focus instead on your core game loop and designing better experiences. And also, what's really cool is all of this is available for free. You may be wondering, why would we do such a thing? Well, in this case, we truly believe in supporting and connecting players, growing communities, and working with our partners. We do want to have that relationship together. It builds a larger and better ecosystem for everyone. The Pocket Pair team that did Pal World is a great example of that not too long ago. That game took off like wildfire, and if you weren't aware, it reached CCU numbers that far exceeded anyone's wildest expectations, and especially coming from such a small team. During those early days of the game, we were able to work and collaborate with the Pocket Pair team to identify backend issues and help stabilize and support them through those early days. And while it was definitely a stressful time for both of our teams to make sure the game was stable, it was also really exciting to see those numbers continue to climb. And I think we could all agree it was a largely successful experience for everyone and a really fun game. So let's take a moment to look at what Epic Online Services is today, what we have available. You can group it into two major buckets, game services, and the one we'll be focusing on, Epic Account Services. And again, this is built around that core functionality that you're probably going to need when you're building a game. How do we enable players to have quick social connections? How can we support multiplayer? How can we moderate player behavior? These are the things that we are trying to support and make easier for you. So on the left, looking at the game services bucket, these are things like matchmaking, voice chat, achievement tracking, player progression. There's anti-cheat tools, bug detection, player reporting, and ticketing. One thing to note with all of this is that all of the data generated under Epic on the game services side is fully controlled by you. We process that data, but you ultimately own that data and how it's used. On the right, we'll dig into more is Epic accounts, secure authentication, friend management, invite systems, and social overlay with rich presence for helping you build those communities and help manage cross-progression and things like that. On the bottom, we do have a section of our tool stack that's for Epic Game Store and the Epic Game Store services. The EOS SDK has this to allow you to integrate with the store should you choose to distribute your game there. And while that's entirely a discussion for another time, there's a lot of things here that are going to relate to your catalog, in-game ownership verification, in-app purchases, entitlement redemption, everything along that line. I do also want to take a moment to mention kids web services. This is probably an area that I think we don't think about as much, but is highly valuable. It's not strictly part of EOS today, but it's a sister product, you could say, that enables you to leverage the world-class functionality that we use in our games and experiences to manage youth audience experiences. You can use it to do things like parental verification, consent management, or adult verification in general to ensure your experiences are enjoyed and moderated for the right audience. It's definitely an important piece of our developer services offering, and I think something a lot more titles should consider to make sure that everyone gets the proper experience to the games they have. So, with everything we offer, it's also worth mentioning that EOS is about choice. All right? It's built with modularity in mind, so you pick and choose the services that you want. Should you need to integrate a voice chat into your game? We have that. Should you need to do cheat detection for your upcoming shooter? All set to go. It's already a service trusted by a number of titles today. Or if you need a central account system, as we're going to talk about, you've already got something proven that'll work for you. Pick and choose what you need. With that choice, we also support, on the game services side, a number of identity providers, whether that be Xbox, Steam, OpenID, or even Epic accounts. We treat them all the same, and that's how you authenticate into the back end. And so using the EOS experience is going to be largely transparent to players. It's your game backend at work. It's also platform agnostic. So use it on PC, console, and mobile. It gives you a common cross-platform tooling that you can use to build your game, and the ability to hook into native platform SDKs as well. Common tooling leads to delivering common experiences, which leads to better experiences that you can build out faster. Finally, I do want to mention, obviously we're at Epic, EOS is not tied to any specific game engine. So that's kind of a new thing that you may not expect. The SDK is supported in both C and C#, with plugin support built for major engines. Obviously, we have the EOS Online subsystem for those of you that are using Unreal Engine, but we also have plugins for Unity and community-developed plugin integrations that you can also consider. One thing that's really cool is just last week, the Game Maker engine actually posted a blog post about their EOS SDK plugin and showcased titles that were using it and leveraging it today. So hopefully, if you're familiar with that, go check it out. Some really great work there. The idea is these plugins will conform to the same development patterns that you're already experienced with, and it will work basically as an abstraction layer to hopefully make that integration a little bit easier. So just to be clear, it's not required to use Unreal if you're using EOS, and vice versa. If you're using EOS, it's not required that you use Unreal. Please pick and choose what you need for your title. All right, bring us all back together before we dig in deeper. Epic Online Services is a flexible, cross-platform, multi-engine SDK that can be integrated into your existing workflow and game engine. It's platform agnostic, creates a common backend for your game, so it makes it easier to ship on the platforms you want to support, and expands your reach to a wider audience. You're in control of that player data and how it's used. The goal is you focus on unique experiences and simplify the technical implementation. You can also use this to get valuable insights into your game's operations, and it's built modular, so pick and choose what you need. All right, let's dig in a little deeper. Talk about Epic accounts. That's why hopefully you're here. At a base level, Epic Account Services is an identity platform that you can integrate into your game. What is unique about what we have to offer versus, say, other off-the-shelf tools or account systems is this is the same service that we at Epic use for our own first-party titles, Fortnite, Fall Guys, Rocket League, and also for our developer ecosystem. How many of you have some sort of tie to Unreal or have an Epic account of some sort? Just by hands. See? You are part of this ecosystem. Welcome. So while the Epic account is similar to something like your Xbox account, your Steam account, or everything else, it's designed to kind of be this spanning place. It's not confined to a single platform. So this is to your advantage, like the rest of EOS. This is a service that is widely adopted by hundreds of millions of players. They have their own social connections. They have their own friends. It's across the major platforms that you want to support. The more people join the Epic ecosystem, the more you'll be able to leverage those connections instead of players having to rebuild and refine their friends in each game that they choose, or feel that they're continually locked in a singular ecosystem because that's just the momentum they have. It's also going to give you an easier opportunity for things like persistence and cross-progression if you do end up supporting games on multiple platforms because you have a single account, a single identity that can allow you to manage all that data easily. We also do, as I mentioned, support native integration into other platforms like Xbox, Steam, etc., allowing you to link those native platform ecosystems with the Epic account to use it as something like a secure authentication method, making for an easier, smoother player experience and allow you to access a broader friend network, which I'll dig into in a little bit. Alongside the SDK itself, we also do have tech that we ship with the SDK, a redistributable for our overlay, which you can load into PC and console today. Mobile's something that we're working on. This gives you a common UI that you can integrate, and it gives you less tech that you have to maintain yourself. So if the player has linked their native platform, or if they've just logged into the Epic account, you can see they'll have all their friends in one place. If they've linked that native platform, their native friends will actually show up as well. So you see a full list of all your friends in the ecosystem that you have, and it gives you an ability to give a consolidated experience, to send invites, make connections, join games, all from one place. Again, streamline that development workflow, simplify that experience for players, make it familiar wherever they come. So why is this valuable to you? Again, like the Unreal Engine, less tech for you to build, take what we have learned, build on top of it, support the platform you need, and it's already in use today by a wide number of titles and people. On top of that, there is inherent value in having something like this to leverage things like word-of-mouth marketing through something like Rich Presence, seeing what friends are playing. It's actually interesting because I'd written this, and I have a friend, just to mention that I have a friend, we were catching up not too long ago, and we were talking about what games he was playing. He mentioned that there were a number of titles on his radar, probably like many of you, we have a huge backlog, but he couldn't stop playing Helldivers. And he said, and I quote, "All my friends in my social panel are playing Helldivers." So for him, it was just too easy to jump into games with his friends. I had that exact same conversation a few times this week. The power of just presence and community and just seeing what your friends are playing is actually very, very real. It will drive player engagement. There's a high correlation with seeing what your friends are doing. So being able to tap into what the Epic ecosystem has is huge because you've already got those friends there. You already see what they're playing. You can pull them in, and you can have that word-of-mouth experience. Let's do some actual analysis of data on this. A few years ago, we did a study of players that were engaged in Fortnite. So in this case, this was players who played 50 rounds a month or more of the game. And we noticed a difference in the likelihood of churn for players who would play alone versus with their friends. If nearly all of those games were played with friends, that player was 80% less likely to churn than playing those games alone. Even if they just played a few games together with friends, they still had a 50% chance less likely of churn. We also noticed a correlation in spending patterns. So if you spend $50 in game, it's 8% more likely that your friends will also spend similarly. On the flip side, if you enjoy the game less and you start playing less and were moving more likely to churn, it also meant your friends would also be moving more likely to churn. So it gives you a lot of power in your hands. The easier it is for friends to connect and for you to make social connections or leverage existing ones, the more power you're going to have in your hands to ensure your game's success and longevity. Okay, I do want to talk about crossplay. I know this is a presentation about identity and account systems, but I do want to mention how these things go hand in hand. How many of you, for example, have made a game purchase based on where your friends were playing it? Right? So you had to choose which of my friends do I want to play with. Or sometimes you end up buying the game multiple times, like myself. I just found out my wife bought our 4th copy of Stardew Valley. She had found new friends she wants to play with. Not ideal for my wallet, but she went where the friends are, right? Looking back at Fortnite, we observed an interesting thing. Each time we added a new platform for support, not only did that bring in new players onto the new platform, we witnessed a lift of new players and increased engagement across all their platforms. Simply put, it allowed more players to join in on the fun because Fortnite was crossplay. Friends are centered around common interests. Things go viral when things are shared among friends and common interests are established. So we add a new platform to Fortnite. That meant more friends could participate. Fewer friends were left out, enabled more friends to talk about a common interest. Suddenly, Fortnite became the obvious place where friends and connections were to hang out. No longer was there a decision, where do I need to buy the game to play this? Or, oh my gosh, my friends are playing on a platform I don't have. It was, hey, when can we play together? Looking at another example of this data, we're going to include Rocket League this time. The influence of crossplay is clear. Through crossplaying, we can see that engagement is closely connected. For both of these games, we saw roughly half of the players would leverage crossplay in their regular play experience. And if they did, remember, if you played at least one game with a friend or a few games with a friend, you're already 50% less likely to churn. Playing with those friends actually also drove up player engagement. Crossplay with friends, it meant players would play more days per week, more hours per day. What was interesting is it was as much as a 5x increase in hours played, and also increased monetary potential for conversion by almost 2%. Those are potentially huge gains that you can leverage and have an impact on your own game success. Online games live or die by their player community, and you want the largest player pool possible. Player count and player connections really do matter. Now, this next one, let's look outside Epic. This is one of my favorites as I was getting ready for this. You're likely familiar, but if not, the Epic Games Store has a rotating free game of the week offering that we've had for a number of years now, and understandably, people like free games. In 2021, we actually started that year by giving away Star Wars Battlefront 2. And this was a little over 4 years after the game had originally shipped. Now, as you probably can imagine, interest in a game that was 4 years old had seen a decline, but that changed with it being given away for free. No surprise there. For people who are fans who maybe missed the game, this was an opportunity to get in and play it. And so the game saw a lot of new claims and people jumping in to play the game for the first time. It also brought back a lot of the PC community who knew they had people to play with again, and the game saw a massive resurgence, and in many ways far beyond anyone's expectations. This only worked because Battlefront 2 was crossplay. The Origin players knew that there was a new ecosystem of players to play with them in their community. This is one of the many Reddit posts that I remember reading, and it was just flooded at the time of players just excited to see new players in their community. Thank you for reviving my favorite game. This is finally the chance I get to play something other than 2 modes. Or one of the common sub-trends was, hey, everyone that's already here, please be nice to these players. We want them to stick around. Don't just tread on the noobs. If you're fragmenting your players per platform or storefront, game promotions like this won't have quite the lasting impact just because it'll be very capped to what that current platform already has. So, small call out to all this with crossplay and identity. I do want to make a consideration for cross-progression and especially single-player games. Cross-progression, I think, doesn't get the kind of consideration it possibly should, especially if your game has, say, a mobile component or an on-the-go component, whether that be an actual mobile app or a Switch experience. And if your game is supported on multiple platforms, there is something to be said about being able to start a game somewhere and pick it up on another platform in another place. To do this, you're going to need some sort of account linking or some sort of a central identity service across the versions of your game. Being able to do so allows you to support things like shared achievement progress, shared unlocks or in-game rewards, or just shared cloud saves so that you can pick up and play and resume where you left off. Having these kinds of things deepens a player's sense of investment, and I've definitely had conversations with people this week that have faced these challenges trying to manage multiple account linking systems that said, you know, I wish I had just had a single identity to manage this because it would have made it a lot easier. Well, you can. All right, one thing I do want to make a mention, I do work on the store, so I want to call this out, make it aware. If you are considering to ship your game on the store, we would love for you to do so. Crossplay between PC storefronts is required, just PC. You don't have to use EOS to meet that requirement. You don't need to use Epic accounts to meet that requirement, but I think we do a pretty good job. You can look at any multiplayer title today. It's on the Epic Games Store. It's also supported on other PC storefronts, and you can use them as an idea to see how they accomplish this. But what is personally exciting to me is as I've watched and worked with titles over the years, most of them actually end up using Epic Online Services to solve this. So I think that's a pretty good indication we're doing something right. What's also cool, though, is titles will come in and use it to solve the initial crossplay requirement, and then shipping their second and third title, they'll actually return. And we're seeing a high rate of return on that. But even more exciting is we're starting to see titles that choose to use this also to support crossplay with consoles, which we don't require. That means that no longer is this just a tech of, oh, we need to solve crossplay to ship on the store. It's, we want to support crossplay and we have a way to do it, and so we're going to. And that's a really exciting thing to see because that means more players can play together with their friends. All right, some kind of best practices around this, and I'm going to try and weave a few of these in throughout the talk. If you do consider having crossplay, and you do consider having this login system, if you support, and this is the requirement side of things, if you support direct friend-to-friend invites within a single platform, for the Epic Games Store, we require that you have a singular experience across platforms. What doesn't work, and what we kind of see titles do from time to time, is it'll be native platform invites, so I see you online, we're both on Steam, send an invite, but then I have a friend I know is on Epic and online, so I send him like a lobby code or an invite session. For Epic Games Store, if you're going to do a social graph, and what we would recommend in general, is make it an equal experience everywhere. See where your friends are and be able to send invites to them directly. Now, in terms of a best practice that you should consider, that we've also talked about before, is be careful about fragmenting your player pool by default. Sometimes we see games that will ship with crossplay supported, but they have it be an opt-in feature, so the default experience is actually a smaller playing pool. While I recognize there are games, and there are genres of games where things like console and PC crossplay can be a concern. Shooters are a great example of this. You've got the whole mouse and keyboard versus controller preference. But for us, and especially on the store, if you're doing same platform support, the experience should be very similar, and so you would want to have the widest experience out of the gate. Have players start by default, and if you need and are concerned about it, have them choose the ability to opt out. Finally, if you're using Epic accounts, we don't want players to feel required to use the store, and we actually don't want players to feel required to use Epic accounts if you don't want to require it. And I'll talk about the first part, but if you're going to use our overlay tech, what I did want to mention is we have a redistributable, like I mentioned before. Bundle that with your game. Don't force players to install the Epic Games Store just so that they can use the overlay on Steam or other platforms. That feels bad. All right, let's talk about some more examples of how to do this in practice. Let's also talk about some best practices. Again, while this is all about code and tech, I'm going to go high level about how to get it done, and it's more just giving you ideas of strategy. And obviously, implementation details vary by game and engine. So hopefully this gives you ideas without worrying about this is how it must be done. But I will show you some examples about how to get it done. So first, let's talk a little bit about how to get this set up. And it should be relatively easy from a back-end perspective. To walk you through the back-end portal, whether or not you're a technical person, this is something we can all do. You've got the developer portal. You've got to set up an organization, and you'll set up one or more products. The products will represent your games. Okay? In those products, you have what we call a sandbox. A sandbox is basically what represents where your game data is stored. If you're shipping on the store, this is going to be like your artifact uploads and your builds. This is also where e-commerce is stored. If you're not shipping on the store, you still need to have a sandbox, but you will need to care about deployments. If you remember, there was those buckets of Epic accounts and game services. The deployment is where EOS data is. So if you want to have fragmented, or if you want to do testing for like lobbies and matchmaking, you'd use different deployments for that. If you want to test achievement progression but not impact your live servers, that's how deployments come in. Deployments, products, and sandboxes all come with an ID that you need to configure the SDK. That's why I'm mentioning it as well. But it's good to kind of get an overview of how our hierarchy is. Sometimes it gets confusing. Along with the deployments and sandboxes, which kind of houses the data aspect of things, you also will set up some clients. The clients are basically your permissions engine of what can my client do locally, what can my client do on the server, can I make calls, can I request calls, can I ask for friend data, can I ask for achievement data, things like that you'll set up. And then most important, if you're using Epic accounts, which is hopefully why you're here to learn about, you'll also have to do a setup of the actual account services configuration, because normally you wouldn't run into this in other platforms, but because Epic accounts can be used everywhere, there's certain permissions that a player needs to implicitly allow an application to access, and I'll show that in detail, and this is how you set that up. So this is where I'm going to risk the live demo gods, because I always like to tempt fate. Let me walk through how you can do this yourself. So let me pause this. We're going to mirror our screen so I see what I'm doing. And give me a moment to transition here. Cool. Let's take a look. So everything I just showed you, let's get a breakdown. Here's our developer portal. It's nice. I've got my organization here. This is my personal org I've set up. I like to cook, so you'll notice I use a lot of demos around cooking. But today, we'll do a new product to get it set up. Okay, so set up a new product. This is our brand new game. I want to use Epic accounts, so we're going to get it started. All right, I've got my product here. First thing I'm going to do, again, product ID, which I'll need for initializing the SDK later. I've got a sandbox that I've set up with my sandbox right here. I have one deployment set up. We set all that up for you. But I do need to set up my client. Client, again, has policy, game policy. And again, this is the types of permissions that you want to have. We're just going to do probably game client with unlock achievements. It really doesn't matter, but you see here, this is where you can toggle, depending on the game services you're using, this is where you toggle what kind of permissions this client has access to. This is to prevent, say, bad actors from doing things they're not supposed to, right? Add new client policy. Add new client. Grab the policy that I have. And the reason that you can do this is, especially if you've got something like a game backend that you want to run with more broader permissions, you could set up multiple policies to handle things and have a very restrictive local policy, again, in the name of security. Epic accounts. So pretty straightforward. There's 3 kind of major parts to this. We'll work back to front. First thing is you need to have it associated with a client so it knows what it's talking to. So we'll set that. This is the part that's most relevant, is the permissions, okay? And I'll have a slide on this later, but when it comes to, again, the application, you'll see a screen like this. If you've ever interacted with your Epic account on platforms other than the Epic ecosystem where this stuff is implicitly captured, you'll probably see a screen like this of basically, hey, this application, user, this application would like to request specific types of information. Are you okay with that? Okay? So consider this when you're first setting up your game, especially if you're going to do something like Friends. You'll probably want your online and Friends scopes access so that you can access that data in-game. Country is also definitely valuable if you care about regional information. And then this is an idea of what the player will see, both on mobile or web, of what their experience is. Now, how to configure this is the brand settings. I'm not going to worry about this today, but this is where you set things like the game name, and then link to like your privacy policy to get more information, and as well as your application logo so that it looks more than a generic box. So once you have all that set up, you are set to go on the back end to use Epic accounts. Not too bad, pretty easy. We did it in what, 5, 10 minutes? Code's going to be a little longer. I'm not going to walk through that. That's for your developers to do. Okay, let's switch back gears here. Extend this. Look at that, internet held up. I'm so happy. Bring this over. So because the internet worked, I can skip some of this, which is great. I had backups planned in case conference Wi-Fi died. All right. There we go. So yeah, just to call out Epic accounts, consider your scopes ahead of time. It's kind of awkward to have to request more than you need to later in the fact, because then you get another prompt and people are like, why are you asking for more things? Not that most people read the fine print, but capture it at first launch and then run. All right. Now, talking about the code, ignore this. This is just sample code to have something pretty on screen. Talking about how to do the implementation details. Now, if your game is going to have a singular central account system across all platforms, some of what I'm going to talk about isn't necessarily going to apply, because most likely you're going to want to prompt login at game launch, and so some of those tech decisions are decided for you and those design decisions. Obviously, Fortnite, Rocket League, Fall Guys do this. There's a number of titles that aren't on the Epic ecosystem that do this. You could probably think of a few. My focus is going to actually be on titles that use to include the Epic accounts login as an optional way to extend the native ecosystem or enable crossplay. To start, some best practices in this space. Again, I've been working with a number of titles over the years. These are just things that I've learned that maybe will help prevent confusion or make for a better experience or just save you time. First, and this is probably one of the biggest ones, if you don't require Epic accounts, like it's not the required identity service across all your platforms, please make sure that you make it something that a player opts into intentionally within your game. Maybe through a setting, and I'll show you some examples of this in a bit, some sort of bool, some sort of button. What we see is sometimes titles will attempt to automatically log in the player at launch, It prompts that consent flow, and players get confused and say, why is my Epic account required to play this game somewhere else? What we instead recommend, again, is that the first time the player logs in, it doesn't prompt that. They intentionally opt into that program. You set that bool in the settings, save it locally. Subsequent logins, they've made that decision, you can do it, but keep that there. One of the reasons this is a common issue is actually the second kind of bullet point here, where we do recommend, and I mentioned this way back, of linking native platforms. So I log in on Steam. I use the Steam session ticket to log into the Epic account. It's a nice, smooth experience, nothing really prompted from the player. But what some titles do sometimes is they say, hey, we're on Steam. Let's attempt to log into the Epic account. If they did that and they linked it, they probably consented to have this in our game, and we'll do that. And that's actually a false assumption. Sometimes players have made those connections through other platforms or historically in the past, and they forgot. And they say, hey, why is this Steam game requiring an Epic account? That feels bad. So don't use that kind of logic necessarily, but instead fall back on Booleans or some sort of optional and intentional login flow. On the Epic Games Store side, we also, I do want to call out, we pass you an exchange code as part of that flow. Please use that. Sometimes we see titles that will do login through, say, the account portal, which means it prompts login every time. That feels weird. You're already in the Epic ecosystem and you have an identity to use. So use that, and again, make it nice and smooth. It shouldn't have to be prompted. Consider your scopes, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, those are the big ones. All right, let's look at some examples of titles that have done this and how you can see it done in games. I'm going to look at 3. I'm going to look at Speed Brawl from, who is it, Double Stallion? Yeah, Double Stallion. I always forget that title. Midnight Ghost Hunt from Vaulted Sky Games, and Remnant 2 from Gunfire. So one example here, you'll see in this case, login home screen. The Epic account is just part of the profile view. Thank you, Rajan, for providing this wonderful experience. You log in, and it's something the player does, and it will prompt the login flow, which will show in a bit to see what the kind of walkthrough is. But they do it from there and from the menu. Midnight Ghost Hunt, they actually do it from a setting, so it's really just option settings, and you can see, and I see this a lot of, something about cross-platform friends and invites, enable crossplay, enable Epic account. Well, not enable crossplay, but it's cross-platform invites, log into Epic account, something along those lines. Make it an explicit, I'm logging into an extra account, okay? And it's in something they can enable and disable in settings. The final one, Remnant 2. I really like this one that I wanted to highlight. You'll see here that they have a button in the top left, probably not the most visible, especially far in the back, but it's there. But what you may notice is this is actually coming from PlayStation. Well, the title shipped last year, on September 29th, or February 29th, just last month, they shipped console crossplay support. So third-party title using EOS and EAS to support crossplay between all platform and players. Really exciting. They put a lot of work into this. And so I'm going to walk through using the PlayStation experience as to what the login experience will be like, but it'll be the same or very similar from all the titles if a player chooses to log in. So you click a button, you say, I want to link my Epic account. From here, this is the screen of this dev ID doesn't have an existing connection, so it's going to prompt a, hey, we don't recognize this PlayStation ID. Do you have an Epic Games account? Please log in. If not, you can create it. We support both of those flows to make it nice and as automated as possible for the player. Once that's handled and the player has logged in, either linking an existing Epic account or logging in and creating one for the first time, it will then prompt the consent flow that we talked about before. All of these screenshots are happening in game, so this is on the PlayStation using our overlay, makes it nice and contained. Otherwise, it would have to take it out to like an external service doing a web portal, a web browser flow. So when you can, try and integrate the overlay. It makes it nice and uses the native flow and experience. You grant consent. Top right, you log in. Hooray, we've done it. You get a nice toast, and then that's when you can access the overlay and the tech there. We have logged in. Once you've logged into your Epic account, the next part you'll want to do is log into the EOS backend. I did want to take a little bit of time to talk this because there's some best practices here. This is called the Connect interface. That's how we log into the EOS backend. And the reason I wanted to highlight it, it has a very similar flow to what the authentication flow has, but this is where you're going to get access to the EOS bits, and you'll handle logic things like player invites. When you sign into the EOS backend, and if you remember from the very beginning, you use an authenticated user platform to sign in. So whether that be an Epic account or a Steam account, you log into the backend and get something that we call a product user ID. That product user ID is platform agnostic, and that's what we associate with whatever identity you've used to log in. And also, because that product user ID is platform agnostic, you can actually link multiple accounts to it. So it can be, no matter where I log in, the same backend user is represented. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because sometimes there's a confusion that can be set up where if you don't handle this logic correctly, you could have a case where a player logs in on Steam and an ID is generated for them. And then if you support another platform, they could log in separately, say on their Epic account, and a second ID is generated for them. And now you have two IDs on the back end representing the same user. So think about this flow. And what you would likely want to do is say, OK, we support crossplay. We're not going to require it by default. First time we log in, we'll log them into the back end. They have a Steam ID. And then we'll see, OK, they chose to log into their Epic account. We should see, do we have an ID? If so, we need to do some sort of merge. Or, no, we don't. Let's default to the Epic ID so we have a single PUID and link the Steam ID. All right? So the design and decision that you want to have is just what is the player doing, where could they log in from, and how do we reconcile those differences between platforms. This is an area where if you don't handle it, it can cause confusion because you could send invites to the wrong location. They don't get received. So just be aware of you have a PUID to represent the user on the back end. How have we handled and associated it with platform IDs? Also, another thing that's commonly overlooked that I did want to bring out and have it documented to the world in this video format is the EOS backend has a 1-hour time limit on its token. We see it pretty frequently where people overlook this. The authentication into the backend expires, and all of their EOS calls start failing. So no matter whatever platform you choose to authenticate with, make sure you hook up to our callback to refresh that authentication token to keep it live, passing an active access token from wherever you're using it from. OK? You logged into the Epic account. You logged in the backend, so you can use the invites and lobbies and all of that. Now, how do we handle the design of integrating with our friends? Let's go back to those examples. Again, there's kind of two major categories that I see with this. Speedbrawl took the approach of handling things in-game through UI. So in this case, they delineated invite Steam friends, invite Epic friends. There's a couple ways this could be expressed. You could have this load the respective overlay, or you could have it load a local list. Or sometimes titles will take approach of doing an in-game UI where they just consolidate everything into a single display. And you just have it delineated by platform, maybe with an icon to say, OK, choose my friends. And it's all handled in-game, no extra tech, works perfectly fine. It's great. If you go the overlay route, Midnight Ghost Hunt, again, you see here they integrated with their Steam ecosystem. So you can see in my case, I see my Steam friends. I know who they are. I can send invites to them, and they get a Steam invite. Or I also have my Epic friends who are online. I can send invites to them. They all see where we're at. And then again, here's the console experience on Remnant 2. If you had friends, they would be here. Sorry, Dev, you don't have friends. Looking ahead, a lot of ground to cover, but we are continually evolving. If you missed the state of Unreal, I do want to talk about a few things that we're looking for. I should have flipped the first and second item. Mobile is our major focus this year. We're bringing the Epic Games Store to mobile, hopefully by the end of this year into next year. And with that, new experiences, new players coming in. So our major focus is going to be expanding that to say, hey, what is required to make mobile a good experience? What gaps do we have in the US SDK will make it a good experience? So we'll be building this out. Along with that is going to be building out better social interactions. So parties is going to be a big focus for us. We want to make it so that no matter where you are, you can form a party outside of a game, inside of a game, be able to chat, be able to associate with them. We also do want to expand and enhance the store experiences. One of the things I'm personally looking forward to that's relevant to friends is the idea of gifting. Probably not this year, hopefully next year, but being able to gift other people games is a great way to get them to play. Now, big asterisk to all this, as with all developer cycles, this may all change tomorrow. Hopefully it doesn't, but this gives you an idea of where our heads are at, and I would say mobile is a pretty safe bet as a whole. Finally, and to summarize, we've covered a lot of ground. You can use Epic accounts as a central identity service for your game across the major platforms you want to support. You can extend this to integrate with the native platforms to create a streamlined, centralized flow for your players in sending invites and joining and experiencing those games. The social graph is something that is already used by hundreds of millions of players today. It gives you an immediate network to tap into. You don't have to build it yourself. It's tech you don't have to maintain, and it streamlines your development process. Combine this with Crossplay, it's an opportunity to reach wider audiences, grow your game, and create for a better experience, and hopefully a more memorable one. And that is everything. Some links here. Thank you all. So if you have questions, feel free to come up. If you don't, otherwise, that's all I have prepared today. Oh yeah, and there's a survey, so please be nice, but say what you will. Yes.
Hi. I'm actually integrating with the EOS and everything right now for my game. And I was wondering if, this is kind of specific, but if you use player save data, do you need to check the cloud saves permission, or is that a separate kind of thing?
So player data storage is going to be the cloud saves that you have. So you wouldn't do the cloud saves integrated with the launcher. You control that all on your own tab.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, thank you. Everything else is great.
The question about player saves and cloud saves, which we support both in the game store and launcher.
Are there any plans to support web, like a web SDK? I run a website that connects Fortnite creative creators and players, and having the Friends API would be really useful.
That's a great question. So the question was about the web and supporting web. We've had a few discussions around it. Some of it is exposed today. We have APIs for supporting authentication. Mm-hmm. I don't believe we have an API for supporting friends today, but we've heard a little bit of it. It's one of those where I think we're going to watch and see as just the interest grows. Obviously, the focus is on the games ecosystem. So if it's a web game that could be packaged, then it would be through the store, like some store ecosystem. So no concrete plans, but the more people are vocal, I'm sure that will drive interest.
All right, thank you.
Hey, I have a quick question about cross-progression and full-price titles that aren't so non-free-to-play.
Sure.
Do you have any data that suggests that that's an important feature? I mean, like, in a case like that, you're talking about a $60, $70 title where you'd have to buy it more than once.
Sure.
And so yeah, so it's come up on our titles before, and it's always been shot down as something, well, nobody's going to do this because they'd have to buy the game.
No, it's a good question. We don't have a lot of data. People usually don't tell us about the cross-progression part. We only know when they tell us. So I think it's more of just a social discussion. Ideally, we've made it as easy as possible, but it's still a tech consideration and time to implement, especially because you'd be using player data storage. So let's have those conversations and see how we can make it. But yeah, right now, not a lot of data, especially for those premium titles for sure.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Oh yeah, if you want to come by and ask more questions, we'll also be at the booth. There's an Epic Online Services section that covers KWS in the store. So myself, a few others of the team will be there. Happy to answer questions in person, offline. Otherwise, yeah, hope you guys have a great GDC.